we have two people I want to have open their mics right now. Corny Gould and Mike Catfish Dosch are with us today, and they're going to unveil the Rebel and talk to us about that and about other aspects of mic processing and maybe even some processing in general. So which one of you guys want to jump in first?
You said
I'll go with
space bar,
catfish.
but it didn't work for me. So, but it's probably because I'm on a Mac and nothing works the same way on a Mac, does it? So yeah,
So true.
it was probably supposed to be, push the Apple symbol, Shift, Option, space bar, and then it would have unmuted. So thanks for inviting us. It's nice to be here. We're going to talk a little bit about our mic processors today, but I think Barry wants to make this a bit more general and speak about microphones and processing, and so we don't have to limit it just to our stuff. But he's going to let us make the pitch anyway, so please bear with us for a few minutes while we do that. I see Mike Tosh is on the call. So this is apocryphal. It's not true, but that's why you call me Catfish, is because people were mixing us up all the time. He's the other Mike Tosh. So because if you put us in the same room at the same time, which has never been done, people confuse us. So definitely not funny. Okay, so some months ago, I'd say actually, I guess it was about a year ago, Corny said that he wanted to make a mic processor, and of course, Corny's brilliant, and so he's got all kinds of ideas that he's been marinating in for some time. And so he brought me a sketch, and it had like 11 knobs on it. And if you know anything about our on-the-air processors or our stream processors in particular, Chameleon is highly automated, and so there's very little adjustability in it, if any. So our software product has some, but our hardware products are practically black boxes in terms of the ability to adjust them. And so he brings me this sketch with 11 knobs on it, and I said, "What's the deal? That doesn't look like a Chameleon to me." And he said, "Well, you got all these different microphones that you can plug in, and so you need to be able to adjust for, pretty much anything that people might plug in." And that annoyed me, and so I asked him the question. I said, "Well, what if you knew what you were plugging in?" And he thought about it, scratched his chin as he does, and he said, "Yeah, okay, if we knew what we were plugging in, that would be a whole different animal." And so the Angry Audio microphone processors are a whole different animal. We have two now. The first we launched a few months back. We talked about it, and it's called Smooth. And the Smooth microphone processor is made for Shure mics. So the key is in the first two letters of the name, Smooth Shure microphones. And it's ideal with SM7. SM7Bs are kind of the current popular model. There's a new one that launched yesterday called the SM7DB. There's SM7 before the SM7Bs. There were SM7As, which were really A's and B's are the same except for the shape of some foam. And then before that, there were SM7, the OGs. These did not have a suffix, and they're kind of rare and hard to get. Very nice if you get your hands on them. Before that, there was the SM7, or excuse me, SM5B, which is the venerated large microphone that people love so much, and they're also rare and treasured. And the Smooth is made for all of these. And in addition to those, it will also work with the Barry. Which one do you have? It's a USB mic, MV something.
MV7, yes.
MV7. It works great with the MV7. You have to use it in.
It looks just like.
Yes, it does. Now you have to use it with the XLR. You can't use it with USB, but if you use the XLR output, it works fantastic with Smooth.
We'll hear that shortly, and we'll do some.
We will. And so that was our first processor, and what's unique about it? There's several unique things, and maybe I should show you a picture. Maybe I can even show you a product here. Yeah, I have one. I'll show you in a few minutes. It's because it's made for this one microphone. Corny is able to create algorithms and contours that are optimized for this particular microphone. And so if you happen to love that mic, with the Smooth, you get that mic enhanced. So if you love the sound of smooth, love the sound of the SM, using the smooth mic processor, you get more of the SM, more consistency because of compression, a de-esser that is superb, doesn't make you lisp or anything like that. And a gating control, a noise gate that's completely new. Corny invented a multi-stage system for noise reduction. He kind of started from scratch, rather than the gates, which everyone has a love-hate relationship with, because no matter how you set the thresholds, you're either hearing noise or you're clipping syllable. And so he invented a new approach to this, which is we call it room, and it doesn't work exactly like this. It's a psychoacoustic thing that he does, and he doesn't let me know all the magic, so I have to kind of guess. But basically, the way it sounds like it's working is as you turn up the control, you hear more and more of the room you're in, along with your voice. And as you turn down the control, you hear less and less of the room, to the point where fully counterclockwise, it's just you. You're very dry. And so you can decide how much room tone or how much of the acoustic environment you want along with your microphone signal. So it's kind of the dream gate that no one's ever made before, and it's very easy to use, and you just listen and you adjust, and you're finished. And it never clips any syllables, because it definitely works on a different principle. The product has a high gain, low noise preamp built in. One of the challenges with Shure microphones is they're relatively insensitive, and so if you get yourself a preamp in a standard broadcast or recording, or live setup, that preamp may have enough gain, but it may not be clean enough. So you may be able to get the gain out of the preamp, but by the time you turn it up, it's very hissy. And so we designed a very low noise. In fact, it's 1.5 dB above theoretical minimum. So we're 1.5 dB noisier than physics. Is our microphone preamp, and so you don't need anything else. People are resorting to boosters oftentimes when they have a lower quality preamp, and in our case, we can give you 70 dB of clean gain, and so there's no need for a booster. And in fact, it sounds better than if you did use a booster in a lower quality preamp. And there's a few other tricks, and we'll talk about those a bit too. But this is the concept behind our microphone processor. The big difference is it's made for a particular microphone. And then Barry, he called me a few days ago, and wanted to know how it was going. And I said, we're launching the Rebel this week. And the Rebel, again, the key is in the first two letters. So this is for Electro Voice RE20s, RE27, RE320s, and that it. There more? Corny? Am I missing any?
Let's see, RE20, RE320, RE27. Those are the primary ones that
Those
we
are the
tuned out,
primary ones. Yeah. So Rebel
including
is
your RE320
my
right there.
RE320. My, because I'm a cheapskate and I bought the Chinese one instead of buying the American-made 20. So the Rebel is made for the Electro Voice microphones. The products are effectively the same. It's effectively the same hardware. In fact, here, let me show you this. This is a smooth here, half rack unit, and in fact, there, get it on the camera here. So you can see that this particular one is smooth, but the difference between the two is the software build and really this lens on the front where you see the name. So this one says smooth, the other one says Rebel, and but the characteristics inside are quite different. So even though they look the same, the contours, the shapes, even the way some of the dynamic sections work are quite different between the two, because now Corny's able to optimize for the characteristics of a particular microphone. And I won't be critical about microphones. Everyone has their own taste. So you guys can argue and say, I love the SMs better than the REs. Someone else can say, no, the REs are vastly superior. We don't mind either way. Microphones are a thing of taste, and so everyone's entitled. But one question that will come up, and so I'll kind of circumvent it a little bit, is, yeah, but what about my microphone? I'm using something different. So can I use your microphone processor with this other thing that I prefer over SMs and REs? And the answer is no. This microphone processor is, these two, one is made for SM and one is made for REs. Now, we may decide that there's another mic out there that we need to, make a processor for. We may. It's really whether it's commercially interesting or not, because in our research, we found that broadcasters and podcasters, our primary target for this product, more than 80% of them use REs and SM. So they are the vastly dominant two microphones used by our target audience. And so, will we ever go after the 20%? It's hard to say. There are a lot of mic processors out there that you could use in place of these, but we do get that question every time. What about my favorite mic? And and then someone will explain why it's their favorite mic, why yours sucks, and why did you use these? And so that's fine. Just want to let you know in advance that as far as these two processors are concerned, we really are focused on those two microphones in particular. Now, you're probably going to ask this other question, and the answer is, well, the other question is, well, can I try it with another microphone and see what it sounds like? And as far as we're concerned, you're on your own at that point, because if you're unhappy, and you'll probably be unhappy, it'll be, well, I plugged in the Rode and the high end isn't quite what I'd like it to be. Can you tweak it? No. But you never know. So there may be some other microphones that plug into these two processors and actually work okay. But we're not going down that path. So any customers that are brave and want to go down that path, just know that it may not get you the results you're looking for. So I think that's about all I need to say. Corny, you should talk a bit about the magic that's inside the box.
Actually, if they're insensitive, they're perfect for talk radio.
Yes, that they are, especially in
Yes.
awful rooms that you really don't want to hear the environment, because lots of people don't build great studio rooms that sound good.
Not anymore.
Sadly, yeah.
Or the content.
Yeah, that too. So yes, so here I am. Yeah, so the idea behind the compression part of the microphone processors are kind of built around some stuff that I've been built in the past for my own use in my various studios. So I've
Hey,
always
Corny,
had
I know I told you to talk about the insides, but there's a great question in the chat, and I want to
okay.
answer it.
Okay, go for it.
Because this actually comes up. It's another common question, which is, yeah, but why didn't you make it with a UI on the front panel so you can choose any mic you want? Or why aren't there dip switches in the back so you can choose any mic you want? And it's a great question. Could we not do it? In fact, some guy said to me recently, why didn't you use a better processor so you could do anything? As if this is somehow a limitation of the product. But here's the thing. Broadcasting is really interesting. What I didn't say earlier is this is not made for recording studios. This would be a disaster in a recording studio. Why? Because I got a vocalist out there. He's singing. I'm listening. Yeah, you know what? I'm going to change his mic. Okay. So I go change his mic. Man, I'm not going to change the processor at that point. Right. So what I want in a recording studio is a highly adjustable processor that I can do anything with. And, that's that environment. But what's unique about broadcasting is you hang a mic and you don't touch it really ever again. I mean, it's pretty unusual I've never seen a broadcaster say, today I think I'm in an SM mood, or today I'm in an EV mood. No, you hang the microphone on the mic arm, you install the thing, and it remains that microphone for the next 7 or 8 or 10 years. So because you're not changing microphones, there's really no reason why, you'd want to have a different processor. Now, you could make the point, Yeah, but you could have made one box, and it could have a dip switch, and you could flip that switch and have the same effect. And then I could be able to use it for either microphone or even a third microphone. And those are true statements, but then something else gets introduced, and it's the initial problem. And that is, how do you set up a mic processor to sound good? And the way we do it is we let Corny set it up for you. So basically, when you buy this box and you plug an SM microphone into it, it's effectively like getting Corny to tune your mic processor for you. And that's the huge benefit. And also, and this is the part that no engineer likes, it's different, it's unique, it's a marketing thing. Making a box for a microphone might seem a little weird, but now think about the podcaster, the guy that goes out and he buys the SM7 microphone because he's told that's the best one on the planet. If I try to sell to him a mic processor that could work with anything, he's not as impressed as the one that works with his microphone. He picked this microphone on purpose, and now he picks the processor to go with it. So it's a bit of marketing to go along with the entire concept. But I think the most important thing here is to point out that once you pick a mic, you're not really changing it. So once you pick a box to go with the mic, you probably don't need to change that either. At least for the decade or so that you use it before you decide you want to use a different microphone. But it's a great question. It really is.
All right. Yeah.
Okay.
And the other thing too is the changes you would make to it are ones that are optimized for the mic. So you'll probably have a disc jockey or a PD that says, I want the mics to sound brighter, or I want the mics to sound, whatever. You can just do that, and everything in there is optimized to make that mic sound, brighter, less brighter, whatever you want, and without having to worry about all the other controls that go around with it as well. And as far as they were wondering why not a computer GUI on there, and it's that answer is pretty simple: keep the cost down. So there you go. So anyway, we have another one. Oh, I was looking at the chat there. So anyway, I'll go back to what I'm saying. So the core of the processor is based on some compression algorithms, which are kind of like an offshoot of the analog chameleon stuff I was doing, but this is stuff that's more optimized around voices, and so that core is in the DSP, along with things that were harder to do in analog that are in here now, such as the noise gating system, or we call it the room, because it's not really gate, it's not really a downward expander, it's a combination of things, so we just call it room. So that was one of those things that's really tricky to do in analog. In fact, it's easy to get one of them to work that way, and if you make a second one, the variances in the components meant that it didn't work quite the same as the first one you built, and then so each one will have to be customized. So it was not easy to do, whereas DSP, it's easy to duplicate something, especially with the precision in the adjustments that have to be made to make that happen. So right now I am talking to you on an SM7 with the smooth processor, and now we're unveiling the Rebel. So over here I've got an RE20. I switch to that now, and this is the RE20, which has its own unique sound, and it's going through its own processor for that right now for this demonstration. So you can hear how the characteristic sounds of each mic is a little different. Now, my SM7 I use all the time in my studio for my stuff, so it's really highly tweaked and optimized, for me using it. This one here is kind of set up more generically. But if you've seen the video, you've seen where I give you a view of the processor when it's working, and I will I accidentally stopped the video. Yeah. Showed you a picture of the rocket. That's not what I was going for. I was kind of going for more of a view of this. Let me get this in the view here.
Now, Corny, aren't you cheating a little bit? I mean, you get that voice. How much of what we're hearing is that voice, and how much of it's the processor? Can you flip it in and out?
Yeah, well, you get to watch me do that here.
Okay.
It's not in a spot where I can look at it easily, but there we go. Okay, now I've just bypassed it out, so it's not in there at all right now. And
Oh,
I
wow,
had to
you
try
suck.
to
You
adjust
don't
it.
have that voice after all. Listen to you.
Oh, stop it. In a world
Sorry.
where only
Yeah.
Mike Dosch has. Okay. So that's with it out of the circuit there. Okay, now it's back in with all the processing going on. So as you can see, I took the front panel off, and the front panel kind of keeps the settings from being bumped, but it's also where all the controls live. And I'm not sure, I'm not sure if I can get the camera any closer without it going blurry, but let's see. Maybe. Are the controls all cleared, everyone? Okay. So behind the panel, you see where we've got just the raw meters there. The first switch shows you it allows you to switch the first meter between the compression, which is what it's showing you right now, the amount of processing it's going on, and the room function. So if you switch it to that, and you can see what all it's doing as I'm talking here, and you can see you can see how responsive it is. So I can do things like, how do you feel about that? And it's not clipping the H and the how. That's one of the things that annoys me with most of the gating on other microphone processors. If you want to say something softly, it's just lost. So you can say something like, so tell me about that. And if you say this so like quietly, like I just did, it opens up, but it still keeps the background. Like what you don't hear when I'm in between words is when I'm breathing. So that shows you that it's killing that stuff. So you don't hear me taking breaths and all that. But that's the meter. You can set there and see what it's doing on the room function. And we'll go back to our gain reduction. There we go. And the second switch in here controls what the second LED is showing you. And right now it's set to show you the input level going into the microphone processor. That's just where I had it when I was setting it up. And it just kind of left it there. You can switch between that or the output to see what it did after processing.
Well, I'm thinking if you set it to output, it just like never changes, right? Isn't just
it changes. It's just higher
Okay.
all the time. Here, I'll change
right.
it for you. Just for your
Just for me. Thank you.
curiosity. So there you go. So now you can see that the output level is a little more consistent. And
it's kind of hard to see the video and the meters aren't really playing
kinda
nice with
washed
each
out.
other, but a little bit. Yeah.
Let me try this. See if I can kill some background lighting. Is that a little better? Okay, 1, 2. Oh, you know what? This
okay.
usually shows it better when you put
Oh,
the
there you
lens
go.
on it.
Yeah, there you go. That helps.
Yeah. So now you can see what the output level is versus the input level. And while we have this here, you can see that on the meter over here on the left is the gain reduction meter. So you can get an idea of how well it works if I'm talking quietly or if I'm talking loud on the music FM, everybody. And it's pretty smoothly. It goes in and out of, those extremes pretty well. So if you're a soft-spoken person, you can light up a few. Or if you're one of those loud guys in the morning show, it's BJ in the morning show on your country music station FM. And you can see how it smoothly goes in and out of that kind of gain reduction. So that's the kind of action that I like in the mic processor. And it adjusts itself based on the vocal characteristics, how you're talking, how loud it is, the way you're talking, the time constants modulate themselves based on all that. So it makes it for a nice, easy setup there. So take a peek behind the glass again. So the second control, I didn't even talk about any control. The first control here is the de-esser sensitivity. And I will take our little handy tool. It's not our handy tool, but we have one just like it. So if you were to crank the de-esser all the way up, so now I'm really de-essing the living daylights out of it. So it's killing down the S's, but it doesn't sound like most de-essers where it makes you sound like you have a lisp. So, and that's an extreme example of the de-esser. Let's see if I can get it back to where I had it before. 1, 2. So 1, 2. C shells. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, that might be close enough. So that's the de-esser activity there. The next control is the drive control, and you can adjust how much compression. So I kind of like moderate amounts. Well, on the RE microphone, I like a little more than I do on the SM because the RE mics can take more compression easily. So I'm going to move this out of the way. So if you want to do the typical disc jockey type compression that the disc jockeys like to do. All righty. Now we're giving all kinds of drive. And BJ in the morning show and your morning show connection on the Music FM. Hey, BJ, what do you have to say for the traffic and weather coming up at the 10s? And so that's driving it really hard. And some folks like that kind of a sound, but it's pretty smooth even when it's nominally being driven hard there.
I kind of like the more natural sound.
Yeah, I do too.
Not quite so aggressive, but
there. Well, we know
I've heard it.
Everybody in this room knows that jock that like to have tons of compression on their voice. All right, so I'm going to set this back to where okay, right about somewhere in there. Okay. Actually, the production guy from a station I used to work at in my engineering days, he loved a ton of compression on this microphone. And his mark of a good quality, a good amount of compression was when he stood in the back of the studio and took his headphones off and just held them in the air. And if they squealed loudly in the back of the room, he'd say, "That's the right amount of compression right there." And I would just kind of go, "Whatever, dude," and just kind of let him do his thing. So we all know that guy. Let's see more to control. Well, the other control here is move this mic here. Yeah, the RE mics are kind of directional like that. The next one is the room control adjustment. That is one of those things where I'm not going to even attempt to try to show you that here on the Zoom, because Zoom has its own algorithms that takes noises out of the background, and you're probably never really to be able to tell what's going on there if I adjust that one. But needless to say, if you're talking into the mic and you turn the control all the way fully clockwise, you will hear the background of the room behind you. And you can talk and turn it all the way down. You hear the room just get quieter and quieter, but the voice doesn't change. It sounds like what you're hearing from me now. So it sounds like you suddenly put a bunch of acoustic treatment in a room. So that's pretty cool.
I'd like to comment on what Corny's talking about now with these adjustments. Now you might be thinking, well, how's this any different than the 11 adjustments idea? It's got a lot of adjustments on it, but there's something that you're not really seeing, and you'd hear it if you were playing with it. These adjustments are very subtle. For the most part, you don't get a lot of range. You just get the ability to take Corny's sound and make it a little brighter, or take a little bit of boom out of the mic if you wish to. But you don't get enough range that you can screw it up. And I've got an anecdote for this, but I think it's a great story. So I sent one to Clark Novak. Now he and I have worked together for years, but he's a voice talent. Used to be on the air. And he's got an SM5B, so he was eager to hear this thing with the SM5B. I had it on the bench at the factory, got everything aligned on the audio precision, shipped it to him. And he plugged it in. A couple hours later, he calls and he says, "It's amazing. It's the most amazing mic processor I've ever heard. It's just perfect. I mean, I'm not, it's not cutting off anything, and I'm not hearing the noise, and it's just perfect." And I said, "Great. Send me a picture of the setting." And he said, "What? What do you mean?" I said, "The settings, the front panel." He said, I never touched them. So, here's a box that I honestly, I don't even know what the hot positions were in after I aligned it and shipped it out. And he just plugged it in and it sounded great to him. So, you can imagine that if did we get that lucky? I hardly think so. It's just every position sounds that good, and you don't get so much adjustment range that you can really screw up the sound. So please carry on, Corny.
Okay. So we're just about through it anyway. So after the room control, you've got the high and the low EQ. So this is where some of the differences between the boxes come in. So for the RE20 microphone, or the RE series of microphones, the lows and the highs work pretty much like, equalization controls you're used to seeing, where 12 o'clock is flat. And as you go below 12 o'clock, you're cutting, and above 12 o'clock, you're boosting. So both controls work that way in the RE version of the mic. The smooth version for the SM microphones, they're a little different. The bass is a cut and boost control, but it's not as much as it is on this. So the range is a little more restricted on the bass. But the highs are either flat or boosted, because the SM mics are notoriously flat. So you're probably not going to have any issues where you want to turn down the highs. You're going to want to turn them up because they just sound really rolled off. So that's kind of one of the differences besides EQ curves and the exact types of EQs that we've got in the algorithm. So the first control in the RE is the lows. The second is the highs. I've been running this flat, so I'm just adding little highs in it. So it matches what I'm doing with the SM microphone there. So I just add a little more highs into this mic here. And the last control is the output control going to your console. So you can set it for, optimizing where you want the fader to be when the microphones are, at their normal operating level. And the next two switches you have, and this is another thing that's a little different between the microphone processor versions here, and that you have these switches here, which are contour switches. So the first one is basically a low rumble cut, and it doesn't. I wouldn't really call it a bass roll off. This is another thing that's a little different. So the low cut on this is meant to get rid of things like if you're thumping on the table or in the mic boom like I'm doing here, you don't really hear much of that, or the springs making their noise. But if you turn it off, and if you have good headphones on, which I don't know how many, you're probably listening to computer speakers, so it would be worth the effort. But if you turn it off and you bang on, say, this arm, you'll hear the rumble and reverberation and all that in your headphones. So this switch is meant to get rid of that stuff without really affecting the voice much. So you barely notice it in the voice as far as the low end, whereas a lot of microphone high cut switches and even mic processors, you turn it on and you lose a significant part of the low end in your voice. So the high pass on this is contoured in a way where it keeps as much of the low end and the voice intact while getting rid of the things like the table thumps and stuff you don't want to get through on the mic. So that's what the first switch is. And in this case, it's engaged. The second one here is kind of like a sparkle switch. So this is another difference between the two boxes. With the RE microphones, when they're flat, they're pretty flat sounding. The RE320 and the RE27 have a significant, the 27 has a significant amount of high-end boost just coming out of the mic by itself. I don't really care for that much high-end boost. In fact, when I plug it in here, I tend to put the high roll-off switch on just to make it somewhere usable to me, but it's pretty bright. 320 it's got the low end that's in there. It's just the brighter than the RE20. So what this second switch does here, if you're using the RE20, you can flip that on and it gives you some brightness that's in the ballpark of like the 320, really. Not as much as the 27. I figure if you want that much high end, then you're getting an RE27 mic. So with that switch off, it's flat. I have it on, which gives this mic a little more high end kick that matches the 320 when it's being used. The other thing with the 320 and the 27 is that their output levels are significantly hotter, and I can switch to a 320 if the group wants me to do that. I can do that. You can see me set it up, and we can talk through that if you want. Or the 27. I have one here. It's not my favorite mic, but I have one as we're done.
You're on the 20 now?
Yes.
Okay. Anybody in the group would, we're taking requests. The 320,
in a moment,
20, or the 27?
In a moment. I have two more things to do, and I'm done with this part. The other switches are the one you heard earlier, the over here underneath the angry face. One bypasses the processing or makes the processing active. And the last switch allows you to switch between the line input or the built-in preamp. So if you want to use your own outboard preamp for whatever reason, or an insert from the board or whatever makes your life easier, you can use the line input on this. And then the last is the preamp gain. Okay. So now we go back to Catfish's thing here. If anybody wants to hear a different one through it.
We're taking requests. The request line is open.
Corny, can you tell me the audio path out of your processor into the Zoom that we're listening to?
So it's coming out of the mic processor, and it's going through my Radius console, a line input on the Radius, and then you're listening to a mix minus off of the Radius. That's where the Zoom is. So that's what's going on here.
Okay,
if you're talking, you're muted. So looks like.
No, I was just curious if you were.
Oh.
So you're an analog out of the processor into the board, digital out of the processor into the board.
In this case, on this microphone, it's analog coming out.
Okay.
On the SM microphone, I'm going in AES.
And then your mix minus into your laptop or desktop is.
Yeah, to the studio desktop over here. Yeah.
Okay.
So you're hearing it's directly off of. Well, there. I do have a slow riding AGC between me and you, just so I don't clip. If I happen to, right now it's not doing anything, but if I happen to drive it really hard, it'll turn it down so I'm not deafening everybody listening.
And then we have all the Zoom processing.
Yes. Yes. And if you want to hear something a little bit closer to what it would sound like, we do have on our Angry Audio YouTube site. I put some videos up, some initial ones of this Rebel, and I've got some with the various SM microphones video, or I'm switching out different mics there. I will be doing the same with the Rebel in about a week or two or so.
Okay, now you mentioned Clark. Most stations are using voice tracking to some extent.
Mm-hmm.
And a basic library of stuff that just repeats. Now, if Clark is doing, let's say, the voice tracking for a station, the whole thing, and then he puts this device in, is that going to change the sound of Clark? And the reason I ask is that many of these things will be butted together. So how much of a difference in sound is there going to be between those cuts?
Well, all of his voice elements you would capture with the mic processor.
But I mean, you already have a library prior to the processor that's still in use. So how much of a difference is it going to make?
So you're saying, how is this going to change between recorded elements that I've already done versus adding in a mic processor now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. That's an interesting question. I think.
Yes, it depends. I guess it depends on how much processing you're doing now, and the biggest difference I've heard from people who have sent us recordings of their SM mics, because the Smooth has been kind of floating out there, little long Rebels just now starting to roll out. So we've had some people send in recordings where they were impressed and they wanted us to hear the difference between their 528 and the SM7 and the Smooth. And as far as compression goes, there's quite a difference. Whereas there's more presence and upfront sound with the Smooth compared to, like, to say, the 528s. And so there's that. But a lot of it just depends on how hard you're driving your mic processing. Now, if you're doing a light amount of processing and you put the Smooth in there and you set it for a light amount of processing, you probably notice some differences here and there, but it's probably going to be kind of subtle to the average listener. But again, if you're doing a lot, if you're using it heavily, your old mic processor, and you put this in, then there'll be a big difference, because the two will react a lot differently with voices. Like I said, the Chameleon mic processors have a more in-your-face upfront sound to them when they're pushed heavily.
Yeah, I guess it's that question surprises me a little bit. But I think the answer would be, if you like what you got, you shouldn't change. I think that would be the right answer. And if you don't like what you got, then there's probably a reason for it. In other words, if you love the sound of this and you hate the sound of your existing processing, then you might re-record some stuff. But if consistency is the most important thing and you like what you got, why would you change?
And another nice thing about these is, after using other microphone processors for voice tracking and stuff over the years, the nice thing about the way I designed these is that the levels on them are more controlled as far as peaks go, versus a lot of the older mic processors where you have a lot of straight peaks that clip here and there on the waveform, or could clip here and there on the waveform. Which makes it kind of hard after the fact when you're not in control of the mix on your console, and some of the cuts might be a little louder than others. And if you're trying to keep from overdriving the input of the automation system by keeping the levels down low, then your voices may not, cut through just right on some tracks. unless you're using like crazy amounts of ducking and all that. So this helps a lot by keeping the vocals present during segues and talkovers.
Corny, are you able to spin that around? If not, I can show the
Oh,
rear
you
of
want?
my unit. It's
Oh yeah, I
it's
can't.
okay.
Yeah, I'll let you
Okay.
show the rear.
All right, let me show the rear. If y'all can see the rear, I got to get this up toward the camera so you can see it. From from your left, we've got a microphone input. We've got a stereo line input on a Studio Hub connector. We've got I can't do this. All right, so we have a stereo mono line output on XLR and also Studio Hub, and then we have an AES EVU output on XLR and Studio Hub. And then finally, we have a remote control connector, and I'll explain that in a minute. It has a built-in power supply, so there's no wall wart. It looks a little unusual here because we have a captive power cable. This particular one's going to Europe, and but those are the connections on the rear. Some people have asked the question, well, I have a digital radio plant, and I don't want to use another analog device. And the answer is, well, then don't. Use the microphone preamp on this to capture the analog microphone signal, and then go into our A to D, which is very high quality, and then immediately into the DSP for signal processing, and then come out AES EVU. So use this as the A to D conversion for the microphones, and then you get all the processing, high quality A to D conversion, high quality preamp, and you're in the digital domain at that point, and ready to rock. The remote control connector, I'll explain that. This is remember that this is targeted at broadcasters and podcasters, and there are some differences between the two. Podcasters don't have broadcast console, and so they sometimes see like a radio studio, and they see guests who have off buttons, for example, and they say, oh, that's really cool. How do I do that with my Rodecaster Pro? And the answer is not easily. And so we built that functionality right into the preamp processor. And so if you happen to be a podcaster with microphones, then you can actually use this remote control connector. And somewhere here I have a button. Yeah, here we go. So here's the button. So you can configure this to be either just a cough button. It's red when the mic is on, and then as when you push it, it mutes. And so this with just an ordinary cable is going to plug into the back of the Smooth and provide that functionality. Probably not useful if you have a radio console and you've got on off remote on off cough functionality already. But if you don't, then we provide it here.
And for fun, if you want, I could show you the analog prototype here, because we all like having fun. So this right here is the analog prototype of the dynamics control that's in the mic. This is hooked up to my condenser, so which sounds very different from both of these mics. But this is it with my condenser mic, which has a nice warm sound, but there's the old analog, so it's still on my condenser mic. So there you go. I use it for some things where I'm voicing over for other people because it's got a nice warm tone to it. So there you go. Little fun there. If I'm back on the RE microphone. I mean on the SM microphone now. Too many microphone models. I'm getting confused. So I guess if Catfish, are you looking at, or do you want to moderate the chat there, Barry? Or I see there's quite a few.
Just go right ahead and answer.
I've been answering them
Oh, okay.
in text as we go.
Oh, okay.
But some others, whether or not everyone's reading the chat, some questions came up. List price, $899. Someone asked, well, what's the sample rate and what is the bit depth for the audio? It's 48 kilohertz, 24 bits. Someone asked the question, it's an interesting question. Could you run existing voice tracks through this and re-record them to make that sound more like the new voice tracks? And that's an interesting answer to Rich's question, which is, well, how do I get consistency? Well, without re-recording, I guess you could come out, go into the line input, and then come out of that and go back into, put put a recorded file that's been processed back on your hard drive. Someone asked the question about what all the dip switches are. I made a list of them. And I think that, yeah. Oh, latency. Someone asked the question, what is the latency through the processor? It's just under 3 milliseconds. Yeah, that's pretty much the extent there.
That's the other advantage of such a simple control layout, because the more complicated you make all the EQs and things like that, the more latency you start to pile into the audio chain that's in DSP. So when you have purpose design EQ curves and things, you can cut down a lot of those straight latency buildup situations in there.
So if somebody asks you, for instance, what you think is the right level of voice compression, where would you come down?
My suggestion for this smooths is to start with about 3 dB of gain reduction when you're talking normally, and then adjust from there. So for me, like on this mic here, make sure, on this one here, I'm about 3 dB when I'm just talking casually. When I get excited, it might jump up to 10. So that's about where it works on this. A lot of it depends on the topology of your microphone processors. So with the smooth, because of their topology, a little bit of compression goes a long way. So, and that's another thing a lot of people have noticed. Whereas other ones like the 528s, to get that kind of a feel for compression, a lot of people will drive them a lot harder than that. The DBXs, a lot of people drive them a lot harder to get that characteristic compression sound. The Chameleon is a lot like the old school compressors and things from the early 80s or so, like things like the LA4. If few people have ever used LA4s or the original DBX boxes that are like half rack space with the wood panels on the side, older boxes like that, when you use them for mic processing, if you hit them like 1 or 2 dB, that's all you needed, and it just sounded bigger than life. Where the newer ones, you have to really crank on them. So the smooth microphone processors is a lot closer to the older school type microphone processing as far as the amount of compression goes versus the newer ones. So
I might answer Barry's question a little different. I think
go for it.
Well, not that I disagree with the 3 dB as a starting point. I think that's an excellent answer. But I'm going to say that inexperienced microphone users, I get this a lot on my church worship team. Someone will sing for the first time, and in the in-ear monitors, they hear themselves. And what do they do immediately when they hear themselves? They back up because they want to hear themselves, right? So the problem with inexperienced users, the guest comes in, it's the governor, he puts the headphones on, he hears his voice, he has that problem immediately. So I'm going to suggest that for people who are skilled with microphones, probably you go for less, and people with less skill, where you think they're going to be variable, especially as they get used to it during the course of the show, you might want to go for a bit more compression and kind of use it to level out their inconsistencies. But other than that, I agree with, less is more. I like the more natural sound.
Now, the PA question was interesting. With the room setting, would that get rid of some of the ambient reflections, let's say, in a church or an auditorium?
Oh, yeah, that's a
church
different question. Yeah,
church or an auditorium. The way the system works, because it's very sensitive to where you are, it's really tuned for like in a room, not so much a live situations where the speakers are going and everything. Now in a room, it'll kill a lot of the reflections and reverberations in the room, and it will sound like you're in a treated space. One of my stations is both of my stations now are non-commercial stations, and one is built in a school, and the same construction company built the studios as they did the school. So the studios are built a lot like a school would be, with hard cinder block walls everywhere. And yeah, they put the sound treatment up, but it's still, there's plenty of hard surfaces in there. So the rooms are kind of reverberant as it is. And we ended up putting bass traps in there and got a little bit better, but they're still a little bit live, especially when more than one mic is on. and I took this in that room and put it in, and it pretty much sounded like they're in the proper kind of studio space. After this was in there, and the PD is like, "I want this," and I had to kind of pry it out of his hands to get it back because it's the only unit I had. It's the prototype. So it helps with that. Now, in a live space, I would say it's probably the room function is probably a little too sensitive for that. So my guess is it won't be the miracle that you want. I think in those situations, you really need some hard gating and stuff like that for that type of stuff, which is what's typically used on live mics anyway, or, live situations. So again, I've never tried it, but I just thinking about it in my head, I don't know if it'll be the best choice for unless you process lightly. And if you're using it lightly, sure, yeah, it only kicks in when they're really loud or something like that. Yeah, you could probably get away with it. You just have to be careful. That's just my guessing at this answer at the same time I'm answering it.
So today I was playing with Barry's smooth because Barry's getting a smooth and he's really eager, and so I was trying to make sure that it sounded good because Barry's going to complain incessantly if it isn't perfect. So yeah, I was working on that. So it'll be interesting to see if this improves. Barry, you said you had some issues, so I'd be interested to hear what your issues are now, and then whether or not after you get your smooth, if it fixes your issues for you.
Well, that would be the thing we want to find out.
But
Mainly,
what are your issues? Yeah.
mainly with this microphone set up to its full level, I find that there are those who can talk over me on our little lunch gatherings here. So as I listen back, the Zoom essentially puts the level right, but it's clear that it doesn't mix as well as it could with, say, Corny.
Oh my.
So basically, you're going to step on everybody. That's the idea. You're
No. I just want to be right in the middle. I just want to be equal.
Okay. All
We were
right.
talking about this the other day too, and one of the disc jockeys that I have remembered over the years and remembered them for what they did is they were very good at controlling their own voice. And at KRLA, as I told you, we had the U87, and he was able to just ride right even with the music in such a way that if you wanted to listen to him, you could hear every word he's saying. But if you wanted to listen to the music, you could, because he mixed it so well.
Lost art.
And I thought that was a rather unique approach, because I've seen jocks that want to be buried in the music. And I see jocks that want to be so far above the music that the minute they open the microphone, it ducks. Just the room noise alone will duck the music.
Or the jocks who are, I call them the nervous fader operators, where they're moving the music up and down all the time when they're talking, just to exaggerate that ducking effect.
Oh yeah.
We could make disableable faders. That would be fun, so they're really busy in there, moving them around. They don't do anything. That would be great. Yeah.
We tried that. And one of the ways I came out of it, and of course this is better for if you're bringing your music in those days off a cart or off automation now, rather than a turntable or other source. I set it so that the pot was wide open and would hit zero. Basically, the way we used to cut them at KRLA was the first note would be +1. Then it would back down to 0 until the last 5 seconds of a fade. And that way, the jock never had to look twice, or even the radio engineer. You just put the pot wide open and you
just
knew what
run
the
it to the
level
stop.
was.
Yeah. You just run it to the stop.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just said something and I think I stepped on you. So I think I hear your problem. So
Okay.
with smooth, you're going to dominate.
Hey.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's the point, that you want the consistency. And that's what we really tried to do at KRLA with the DAP, and what we were trying to accomplish. The whole purpose was to get everything coming. And I recorded the music library 3 different times under 3 different program directors. But the key was every single cart, they knew when they hit the button, +1, it hit right there and wipe away the previous song. And if they let it run to the end, they'd get a 5-second roll off at the very end. And that way they knew what was going to happen, and they could make those segues much more audible and pleasant to the listeners. Or so I pretended.
All right. So if microphone, well, you know what? Let me give you guys an update on another product. And while you're thinking about your microphone and processing questions, I think before we told you all that we were making a new USB audio interface. And I think it was Tim Braddock who just reminded me in a private chat. He says he's loving the USB gizmo. So thank you, Tim. Appreciate that. We have a USB gizmo that he's referring to, which is USB audio to analog input and output. It's fully balanced. It's broadcast grade. It's in a steel chassis. It's fully isolated power, and so it's a nice utility product. But we also, for the company Max Connect, we are now making a product called the U192, and this is the U192, and this is a 192 kilohertz sample rate USB sound card. And what's unique about it, and it's the first, I don't know of any others in the world, what's unique about it is it's analog and digital and multiplex. So this is made for products like Stereo Tool, FM processors, and Breakaway FM processors. And these days, I guess, Telos, Omnia, they have some software-based processors. And so this would be a great interface. You run the processor on another machine, a server grade type machine, or a PC, and then you use this as a sound card interface to come out of the computer and ultimately go to the next the next item in your air chain, which I guess would be the exciter in this case. And so this is pretty cool. It's almost shipping. It'll be shipping next month. And I thought I'd give you an update on that. People ask about this all the time. I think the idea of using something like Stereo Tool is a fun idea, but it's really been kind of a science experiment for a lot of people. It's like, oh, Stereo Tool, great, I can run that on a computer. How do I get audio in and out of it? Well, you use these sound cards. Yeah, but oftentimes they won't pass composite. So you got to find, it's like a narrow
loops.
Yeah, or ground loops, sure. I'm thinking about the people that end up with with sound cards that it's like a narrow, it's a pretty small list of ones that will actually pass composite, and then even the ones that do, they might not pass it at a high enough level to be useful to you. So you're cobbling together sound cards and amplifiers in order to make this work. Well, that's and then Hans says to me, why don't you think more people are using Stereo Tool in in real radio stations? And it's like, well, I think I might know the answer to that. And so this we're getting a lot of really great feedback that this is going to be something that people really want to jump on. And I guess they're back ordered already.
Now, what do you have for processing internet radio stations?
That's a good question. We Angry Audio, we do not make over-the-air processing, and that's by choice. Not that we don't know how. Corny obviously knows how, but we've decided that it's a very crowded space, and until now we haven't wanted to really get into it. We focus primarily on studio processing and streaming processing, live stream processing. So we do multi-band processors, but we're focusing more on digital audio delivery, either live streams or HD. A lot of people are using our processors for HD2, 3, 4, 5. So that's kind of our area. And we also have software processing. We have the C6S, which is the Chameleon 6S. S is for software, and this will run on Mac or Windows, and it's a live stream processor. And so this is our area of expertise, is live stream processing and studio processing. At least until now. Yeah, things might change. We might decide. Corny might wake up one morning and say, "Gee, I miss FM processing." Who knows? Then we'll get back into it. He'll have to drag me kicking and screaming, but he can do that.
Well, let's take a minute or two here. You made the point, and it is very valid, that microphones, like speakers, are very personal items. And some people have great love for a certain model. Some people don't care. I think one of the biggest problems in broadcast is the majority of announcers do not know how to address a microphone properly. Now, you may say, how can you say something like that in an industry of 20,000 radio stations? Because what you hear on the air, far too many do not know how to address a microphone. They are either eating it or they are too far away and muttering or talking like, oh no, I better not start whispering into the microphone. You're going to accuse me of things. But talk to us, if you would, Mike, because you've done research into this, and comments you were making about several of the models. In general, what would be the difference between the Shure line and the EV line, for example?
They sound different.
Oh, thank you very much.
You wanted
Yeah.
a scientific answer to that. Every loudspeaker sounds different, and every microphone sounds different, and some things tickle our ears and some things just grate on our nerves. And so I never get into debates with people about taste.
Not debates, but rather,
Yeah.
let's look at it this way. For some of us, we figure the Shure is a flatter microphone, where the EV is a crisper microphone.
Okay.
That's not an unfair characterization.
Yeah, I can talk a little deeper into that kind of thing. Like on the Shure microphones, the responses are very different between say the Shure series of microphones and the RE ones. The Shure ones are primarily, most of their mics are built around those Unidyne microphone elements, and the way they get them to sound different is all built on what's happening at the back end of that capsule. So on the body of the microphone, when Shure designs them, they will give you a certain resonant tone to them. That's how they kind of shape the sound of those capsules. So the SM7s have that large, back end behind the foam piece. I can, let me run over here and grab one real quick. Catfish, talk while I do that.
Here, I'll make some shadow puppets or something. So my own background before I got into making broadcast equipment is recording. I used to design recording consoles, so I was very, very involved in the recording industry in Southern California. And so it's amazing the different microphones that are used in a good quality mic locker. You open this thing up, it's got $60,000 worth of microphones in it, and everything's used for something else. First time I went into a broadcast studio and I saw an RE, I guess it might have been an RE20. I said, why are you using a kick drum microphone for the announcer? Because to me, that's what we used them for. They were great. You could put a lot of level into them. You could stick it in front of a guitar amp, or a kick drum, and you could just bang on it, and it was fantastic. And but for the same reason, it makes a great announcer microphone, because someone was saying earlier, that insensitivity that you get with certain dynamic microphones is very useful if you don't have a great quality room.
Yes.
So
And then if you look at the old movies and television shows, what do you see more often than not? The 77DX.
the idea is
Yeah.
you gotta get a lot of energy into that microphone, and you really don't hear much reverb coming out of the room. So I understand why people pick these mics. Corny?
Okay, so so like the SM7, this back section here is basically a resonating cavity, and seems to work with the rubber stopper on the back of the capsule in there, so it gives you a nice bass resonance. But it's essentially the same capsule it's in the SM57 mic. Now this one has the I call it the presidential windscreen on it when they use these things outdoors for the president. But the nice thing about this is with this big old windscreen on here, it really knocks down on the P-pops, and it gives you a sound that's pretty close to the SM7 minus the bass resonance. So so it's kind of the trick they play. And the SM5 mic, which I have one of those over there too, it has foam, so there's no body in it, but on the back end of the capsule, there's a metal tube that acts as a resonating chamber. And that one's tuned to kind of roll the lows off below 100 hertz, because that was originally designed as a stage microphone for use in movies and boom arm mics. So they have that roll off below 100 hertz on there so that you don't get a lot of handling noise from the boom arm. But, radio people at some point discovered that it sounded great in their studio, so became a radio mic. And
the roll-off helps because the guys who eat the microphone don't get quite the same proximity effect as they might on one of the EVs.
that there's two things that the SM7 does that helps with it. That's one of them, and the other is that the capsule is buried inside the foam blimp body, so it's actually in the middle of all that foam. So you're already backed away from the capsule by almost the right amount to keep the proximity effect from building up if you talk up against the foam. So even if you're eating that microphone, you're just eating the foam, but the capsule's still buried down inside the mic. So those are the two things that to go along with what you were saying.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the SM7 and the SM series of mics, they kind of have a natural roll off at the low end, and and that's kind of where they sound. Now the RE20 mic, and I think this is the reason why it was used as a kick drum so much, is that it has this low end resonance. It's kind of like this thunder to the voice, which is why I think so many jocks like it. So if you've got a deep voice and you're talking, it just kind of it's this thing is pretty flat all the way down. It's a flat microphone all the way across. The Shure microphones.
So it pins a pair on the announcer. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Got it.
Yes, if that's what you're into. And so the other thing, these mics are pretty flat, actually, surprisingly. They're pretty flat across the board. The SM mics, when you start getting in the high end, you see all these little bumps and wiggles in there. And if you look at them carefully, you'll see that a lot of those wiggles are falling right where sibilance would be an issue. So it was obvious that when they designed that mic, it was vocals in mind with that microphone. So it's got a natural sibilance knockout to them in there. And these are pretty flat. So if you have a really sibilant voice, you can hear it come through. So that's where de-essers come in handy. But it has a certain crispness to them as well as the low end. So that's, one of the reasons why so many people like them. But they do have a sound. So if you're used to one type of mic, it's hard to switch over to this one. So for me, I just happen to personally like the way the Shure mics sound on my voice because they don't overly boost the bass. Like on these, I have to be careful with how I'm using them because if I'm jockeying up a song, you may not understand everything I'm saying because my bass might get in the way. Whereas the Shure mic gives me all the bass I have, but it's cut down enough where I seem to come through a little bit better. Or I'm just used to the way it sounds. So there you go. But my favorite mic is the SM5. It's just really big because I have screens in front of me that I use all day. So it's always in the way of the screen. So I don't always use it for my day-to-day stuff.
It is big. And for those who think that there's actually a great story that goes with the SM7 and the SM5 that Corny told me. And here, I'll relay it and you can tell me if I get any of it wrong, okay? So the idea that the SM7 sounds different from the SM5, it's not just imagination. there actually was a pretty significant change between the actually the SM5B became the SM7. And at first, the SM7 sounded very similar to the SM5 because they used the same mic element. But when they launched SM7A, they changed to a humbucking mic element, which is actually much darker. And so when people, in fact, I was a little surprised to learn this, SM7s without the suffix. You know that SM5s are rare and people, spend a lot of money to get them. But what you may not have known, and I certainly didn't know it, was that SM7s without the suffix are also rare, and people will spend a lot of money to get them. Not quite as famous as the SM5Bs, but still, treasured, and people will spend up to $1,000 to get their hands on one. And they do sound different. They have a more airy sound. And what Corny's done with the sparkle function on Smooth is amazing, because you can plug in an SM7A or B. Look, they're basically the same microphone, same element. They both have that dark sound. They just have different foam. But if you plug in an SM7A or B and you like the sound, you don't do anything. You just leave sparkle off. But if you want that newer mic to sound like one of those legacy mics, you want the SM7B to sound like an SM5B, for example, you turn on sparkle and it gives you that airy sound that those microphones had. And is it exactly the same? No, but it's pretty similar. So
In fact,
might save you $1,000.
This mic that I'm holding up is one of the SM7 original ones. I just have a modern close talk filter. This one had to be from the early 70s because the paint job on it is very different. I don't know if it's even going to come across, but it's the typical gray mottled paint job that a lot of things had back in that day with the dark speckles on it. So, complete with the rusty screws on the back there. So this mic has seen some action. But what I can show you the difference here, this sparkle is going to be on, so the effect is going to be exaggerated. But I'm just going to plug in this older classic SM7 here. Okay, so this is the classic SM7, and you can tell that it's got a lot more high end on it versus the SM7B, which is kind of rolled off. And that's exaggerated because I have the sparkle switch turned on because of the SM7B on here. But there's a difference between the sound of these two mics. I happen to like, this sound, but I don't like hauling out my classic mic for everything. So that's where I came up with the sparkle.
Then if you want to go to the
So
other end, we have our little Sennheiser.
Yes.
Happy.
So again, the recording engineer in me says, why are you using a tom drum microphone for announcers?
The Sennheiser mics are pretty cool. The thing I hated about them, the thing I hated about it is that people didn't always realize that little ring on the back changed the response. So everybody would move them and end up flipping that switch around. And by the time it came around for me to talking to, I was like, hello, what the hell's wrong? I have to flip it back.
We solved that one too. We simply took the little stick lock out of there. You can turn this thing around all day long and it won't change.
If you go to Munich, Germany, and go to the Hofbrauhaus in Munich, you'll find they use those as the talkback to the kitchen for the Fraus to give the orders to the cooks back in the kitchen. And they use old Shure 588s or something on their PA system with a Shure Vocal Master.
Of course, they use Sennheisers as talkback microphones. They also use Mercedes as taxis there. So.
Well, it's true. Yes, they do. So there you go.
That was the one thing that was pretty funny. The first time I was over in Europe, it was actually for the IBC in Amsterdam. And I'm walking around, I'm seeing all these Volvos and BMWs all over the place. And my first thought was, wow, these people must have some money. And then a few days later, it's like, wait a minute, that's probably like Ford or something like over there. It's only expensive to us because they have to import it. But for those guys, it's like a Chevy,
But the
Sennheisers are like a Radio Shack mic to them, I guess.
They're crisp. They're crisp.
Yes. Yeah, I meant as far as them being used on PAs like they're nothing.
Yeah.
So
I always found it was interesting that the difference between the two models, the 421, 431, you could hear it on AM or FM. You could tell which one they had. And then, of course, there is the famous 58.
SM58. Yep. That
That-
has the
that one
Unidyne
works.
capsule in it too.
Yeah, that one works beautifully with smooth. If you yeah, it's
All right.
cheap. It's a lot cheaper than an SM7.
And if the SM57 with that windscreen on it, and you with a little more bass EQ, and you get something that's pretty close on SM7. So
Was it the
$100
57 that Sinatra didn't like and the 58 that he did, or vice versa?
I don't remember, but they do have slightly different sounds to them because I think the ball kind of changes the way it sounds. With 57 definitely is a lot crisper than the 58 because there's nothing there. I mean, it's just a naked element for the most part. So,
And the 57 can be used as a hammer.
yes.
No, that's the EV.
635s.
Yeah.
Catfish, I like your story about starting in the recording side of things. I was in broadcasting out of high school for about 5 years and then found myself in a recording studio and again, the microphone closet with things that I'd never seen before, including a whole school of EV and the really large diaphragm Sonys. And it was a Neumann house. They actually were a dealer. So every conceivable Neumann was on the floor to show and tell and use. And all of a sudden you also had a console that had 3 or 6 knobs with variable sweeps and cues and stuff on it. And you're learning all about processing mics and who sounds best. And I did have a voice talent, female talent, and she didn't sound good in front of Neumanns or Sennheisers. There was nothing. And I ended up going to a really simple EV pencil mic. And all of a sudden the distortion that I perceived in her voice recording went away. And I still ponder that today. Did I just not have enough microphones and the time to test everything? Or was she just had an unusual set of pipes?
She probably did have an unusual set of pipes. And I've been right where you were. I've tried things and scratched my head like, why does that sound good? Well, it sounds good. Moving on.
Yeah, I know we did classes on, do you want to be a radio announcer, quote unquote? Do you want to be voice talent? And throw scripts on a stand and let them try things. But we also had disc jockeys come in and learn about how to work a microphone. Barry's point is well taken. You just, they would just mosey up to the mic and scream, as opposed to knowing how to work the mic, like good musicians on a stage will do. You're always amazed. I don't have to set limiters that much on that person because she's working the mic. She understands that process about being intimate with that mic. And we lose that in broadcasting.
How would you like to process this old microphone?
Oh my.
Now, where do Neumanns stand in all of this?
You mean the newer Neumanns or the older Neumanns?
Oh, the 87?
Okay, the older, recording studio style microphones. Yeah.
The NPR standard.
Fantastic mic. Fantastic vocal mic. I would say in general, you probably are going to want to have a better room treatment for that kind of microphone. But as long as NPR has it, they build nice sounding studios. So, I personally, I like to hear the room. I want to hear the room if it's a good room. Unfortunately, most radio studios these days aren't built like that. People not putting that kind of money into it. And you even hear air conditioning coming out in the studio because they didn't design it right. And so it's kind of tragic. But yeah, if you have a great room, you get condenser microphone and you can really hear everything. You can hear them swallowing if you want.
Well, Marvin, as you remember at KRLA, all they had to do is have somebody open the door to the control room while the mic was open and the whole station would duck.
Right.
That was one of the very first things that the DAP solved.
Yeah, we used to use Neumann in Boston. Now, I remember going to, I was offered a job at KPOL in Los Angeles. And, they're taking me on a tour through it and took me to lunch at the Brown Derby. Very impressive.
Nice.
Especially,
Nice.
you were very important when they brought a telephone to your table. But they had an EQ switch on the board for each announcer. So they had tweaked something in there, whether it was processing or what, and each announcer had his own setting.
Interesting.
I have a very that brings back memories where I shudder, because we had at one point at the station one of those programmable microphone processors in, so each jock could have their own preset. And one jock in particular, every other day would have me adjusting it because it sounds different today. So, you just sound different today in your head and all that. And I was in there so many times tweaking that thing for him that I just pulled it out one day and put the 528 in. What happened to it? I need that. It's like, it broke. I was wasting so much time in that studio with that guy every day. It was like driving me insane.
I wonder if that switch was really connected to anything on that console, or if it was just to appease the various talent. I've got to have it in Bob's position right now.
But
I didn't talk to the engineer, so I don't know how it was wired.
Well, it might be. I had an old studio console I took in trade years ago when I was in the sound business in Dallas, and it had a producer's desk, and it had this great place for the producer to be, and it had a whole bunch of knobs and stuff, and they were labeled, strange things like, and they didn't connect to anything, but that way, when the guy says, I think I need a little more top end on so-and-so's voice, we'll try turning that fourth knob over there and see if that's better. Is that better now? Yeah, that's way better.
Yes, and we're also walking into the days of flipping the phase on the microphones.
So Grady has been holding that microphone for like 10 minutes. I think he wants to tell us something about it, don't you?
I was just waiting my turn.
This is your turn, man.
One of my favorite vocalists of all time is, of course, many other people's attitude as well, Frank Sinatra. I'm holding in my hand a lesser expensive version of what is rumored to be his favorite vocal microphone for live performance, an AKG C535EB. AKG made a version of this, I think only one of them, that was gold plated, and they gave it to him. And now, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, it was on sale on eBay for like thousands and thousands of dollars. But when I found that out, I got one of them brand new, because they were no longer made at the time that I started searching. But apparently there were a few of them in boxes in some warehouse somewhere. And one of the dealers put them on sale, and I placed an immediate order for one. And then it took me almost 3 months to get it. And then I got this one from a guy with a studio in New Jersey who had decided to sell it. So now I have a, quote, matched pair of microphones. But the interesting thing about this microphone is I learned from it something that I had already known earlier. This is a condenser microphone. I use this now for all my voice work, except when I'm on this show. And I'm just using the microphone and my stupid little camera there because I haven't gotten around to putting an audio processor on this yet. I've got a couple of old, what is this thing over here? PreSonus Eurekas sitting on my desk, and that's not a very good mic processor. It's just a cheap one. So now that Corny's got this new product that he's come out with, I'm keen to get one of those things and see what I can make it sound like. But the primary reason that I wanted to say something is I discovered years ago that microphones, as we all know, are sensitive to the input impedance of the mic preamp. And I discovered back in the 2000s when I was using some inexpensive consoles that had a single input stage, and you could change jumpers on the motherboard, and you could get it all the way down to mic level, and it wouldn't sound bad. It turns out that the RE series microphones want to have a 1.5K load. If you load them with a higher resistance, the transformer coupling in it develops a bass boost that unloaded can actually create infrasonic distortion in certain preamplifiers and stuff like that. And so I got into the habit of, I would go around to all my radio station clients with a little plastic bag with 1.5K metal film resistors, and I just stick them inside the XLR connectors. And all of a sudden, the RE microphones would sound a lot better. That's why when I found out that Corny had a totally different analog design for the RE mics from the Shure mics, I was curious if one of the differences when it was in the actual analog preamplifier.
That's a good question. That part's mine. Corny did the digital stuff. I did the analog stuff, and no, it's the same one.
But you and I talked a lot about the impedance, though.
We did. Yeah, we picked an impedance, but it is the same in the Shure and the RE. And now I want to go back and look more carefully at that. Now that you've brought that up, it's an interesting question.
Well, there was a syndicator years ago who developed a processor, and he would take it around to stations and bypass their processing and put his in. And everybody thought that it was just wonderful. It sounded so much better. And it turns out it was nothing more than an XLR, some wire going to another XLR. That was it. And everybody thought it sounded so much better than, the dozen or so processors that were in line.
It was good wire, though. It was a really good stuff.
Yeah, it really was. And of course, it was potted, so nobody could get in and see what it was.
Yeah. I just Michael Circus just sent me a schematic last week for the original Valley People Trans Amp, and so he had this for years, and I used the Trans Amp in recording studios years ago, and they're pretty impressive. So he sends me the schematic, and I'm looking at this thing, and I'm thinking, that's it. It sounded amazing, and it's so unimpressive. It's such an unassuming design, but it did sound good. So,
along the lines of that wire sounding so good kind of thing, that's one thing I have to be careful with when I've been working on some pretty impressive updates to the C6 software. So what I do is I compare what I have, the new candidate to the existing one, and or I might compare one version of a new one to another, and this is more the case what I'm getting at. But I know that if I did something and it really makes a difference or not, because like when I'm designing it, I hope that I made a difference, and that hope is enough to make it sound different when I switch to it. So the trick I've taught myself was, okay, now does the old one sound better than the new one? Or does the new one sound better than the old one while I'm switching? And if I can trick myself into hearing that change flip back and forth just by suggestion in my head, then I know, okay, there's no change in the way it sounds. But if I can try to trick myself like that, but I still hear a difference, then I know, okay, we made a difference. But that's when we start getting down into the weeds with stuff. But it's interesting that can even happen to the designers.
I'm actually going to have to go now. So, Barry, are you okay with me dropping off? And
Oh, sure. Well, glad to have had you this far.
I'm going to go work on your smooth.